When both of them go silent at the same time, something happens that neither of them expected. And most people who study relationships have never talked about this. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what you are about to hear is going to completely change how you see silence in relationships forever. If you have ever been in a relationship where one person pulls away and the other person chases, drop the word silence in the comments right now. We are building something real on this channel, and we need your voice here today. And before we go deep into this, if this channel has ever made you feel seen or understood, please subscribe to Life Relationship Channel. We are working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and we are not even close yet. Every single subscribe right now matters more than you know. Hit that button. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Now let us get into this. Two people, one carries everything, one feels everything. And the moment they both go silent at the same time, the entire dynamic shifts in a way that most people are completely unprepared for. Let us start at the beginning. The avoidant person in your life is not broken. They are not cold. They are not emotionally dead inside. They learned something very early. They learned that needing people leads to pain. They learned that vulnerability is dangerous. They learned that love comes with a cost that is too high to pay. So they did what any intelligent human being does when they keep getting burned. They stopped reaching into the fire. The empath in this story is also not broken. They are not weak. They are not too much. They are someone who learned something equally early and equally painful. They learned that love means sacrifice. They learned that their worth is tied to how well they can heal other people. They learned that if they just give enough, if they are just patient enough, if they just love hard enough, eventually the other person will open up. Eventually the walls will come down. Eventually it will be worth it. So you put these two people together, and what do you get? You get a cycle. A very specific, very painful, very predictable cycle that neither of them chose. And both of them are trapped inside. The empath reaches, the avoidant pulls back. The empath reaches harder. The avoidant pulls back further. The empath starts to panic. The avoidant starts to shut down completely. And this goes on for months, sometimes years, sometimes decades. And then one day something shifts. The empath gets tired. Not the kind of tired where you take a nap and feel better. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. The kind of tired where you wake up one morning and you look at your phone and for the first time in a long time, you do not reach out. You do not send the good morning text. You do not check to see if they watched your story. You do not leave the door open just a little bit in case they decide to walk through it today. You just stop. And on the other side of that silence, the avoidant feels something strange. At first, they feel relief. Finally, space, room to breathe, no pressure, no expectations sitting on their chest. They exhale for the first time in what feels like forever. But then something else starts to happen. It is quiet in a way that does not feel right. And this is where it gets fascinating. This is where everything you thought you knew about avoidance gets challenged, because the avoidance starts to notice the silence. Not right away, not on day 1, but somewhere around day 3 or day 4 or day 7, depending on how attached they actually were, something shifts inside them and they cannot quite name it. They tell themselves they are fine. They tell themselves this is what they wanted. They tell themselves they are better off without the pressure and the emotional intensity and the constant need for connection. But the body does not lie, and the nervous system does not lie. And what is happening inside that avoidant right now is a very old, very deep fear starting to rise to the surface. It is the fear of abandonment. The same fear that is driving the empath is actually living inside the avoidant too. It just looks completely different. The empath shows their fear by chasing. The avoidant shows their fear by fleeing. But underneath both of those behaviors is the exact same wound. I am not lovable enough to stay for. The empath believes they have to earn love through giving. The avoidant believes they will lose love no matter what they do. So they might as well leave before they get left. Different expressions, same core belief, same original pain. Now here is where no contact between these two specific people becomes unlike any other no contact situation. Because when two people with this particular dynamic both go silent at the same time, what you have is two people sitting alone with the very wound that created the dynamic in the first place. No distraction, no chase, no pull, just the wound, wide open, staring back at both of them. The empath in those first few days of no contact feels something they were not expecting. They feel guilt, massive guilt, because their entire identity has been built around being the one who gives, the one who shows up, the one who keeps trying. Going silent feels like giving up. It feels like abandonment. It feels like they are becoming the very thing that hurt them. But if they stay in no contact long enough, something remarkable starts to happen. The guilt starts to fade. And underneath the guilt is anger. Real anger. The kind of anger that has been buried under years of excusing and understanding and giving this benefit of the doubt. The kind of anger that says, I kept showing up and you kept pulling away, and I deserved more than that. And that anger, as uncomfortable as it is actually the beginning of something important. It is the beginning of the empath starting to take their own side for the first time. Meanwhile, the avoidant is having their own very different but equally significant internal experience. Around day 5 to day 10, depending on the person, the relief starts to wear off. And what replaces it is something the avoidant has very little experience with. It is longing. Not just missing someone in a general way, but a specific, aching kind of missing that does not go away with distraction. They find themselves thinking about small things, a conversation they had, the way the empath used to notice things about them, the way they felt known even when they were not trying to be known. And the avoidant does not know what to do with this, because their entire system is built around not needing, around being self-sufficient, around proving to themselves that they are fine alone. And here they are fine alone and not fine at all. This is the moment that most people do not understand about avoidance. Most people think avoidants do not feel. They feel everything. They just have no safe container for the feeling. They have no practiced way of sitting with emotional pain without their system reading it as a threat. So they have spent their whole life building walls, not because they do not want connection, but because they are terrified of what connection cost. But here is what no contact does to an avoidant that nothing else can do. It removes the thing their system is most addicted to. Not love, not connection, pursuit. The avoidant is unconsciously addicted to being pursued. Not because they are manipulative, though the behavior can look that way, but because being pursued while pulling away is the only kind of love that feels safe to them. It is love with an exit. It is connection with a built-in escape hatch, because if they pull away and you keep coming, they know they are safe. They know you are not going anywhere. They know they can open up just a little without the risk of being abandoned. The moment you stop pursuing, you remove that safety mechanism, and for the first time they have to sit with something genuinely terrifying. What if they just left? What if I push too hard? What if this is what happens when you let people in? They leave anyway. And that fear, that activated nervous system, that rising sense of loss, that is what starts pulling avoidance back into contact. Not logic, not love, fear. The same fear that made them pull away in the first place. And here is the painful and important truth about that. If the empath goes back at this point, if they respond to the breadcrumb or the late-night text, or the sudden burst of warmth from the avoidant, nothing changes. The cycle just resets. The avoidant gets their nervous system calmed down, they feel safe again. And slowly, almost invisibly, the pulling away starts again. Because the wound was never actually touched. The pattern was never actually interrupted. The comfort was restored before the growth could happen. This is why no contact between these two people is so significant. And it is also why it is so difficult, because the empath wound also gets activated by the avoidant reaching out. Their wound says if they are reaching out, that means they love me. If they are reaching out, that means I should go back. If they are reaching out, that means maybe this time will be different. And the empath, desperate to believe that the love was real, that the relationship meant something, opens the door again and we are back to the beginning. So what has to happen differently? What does the research on attachment and the science of nervous system regulation actually tell us about how this cycle finally ends? It ends when one person in this dynamic does the hardest thing they have ever done in a path. They stay in the discomfort long enough to meet themselves on the other side of it. For the empath, that means staying in no contact even when every cell in their body is screaming to reach out. It means sitting with the guilt without acting on it. It means letting the anger come up without turning it back on themselves. It means being alone without filling the alone with another person to fix. Because here is what the empath discovers in that extended silence. They discover that they were never actually as present in the relationship as they thought. They were present to the avoidant. They were present to the avoidance needs, the avoidance pain, the avoidance patterns. But they were not present to themselves, their feelings, their needs, their limits, their actual experience of the relationship. And in the silence, for the first time, they start to hear themselves. And what they hear is something they have not allowed themselves to acknowledge. They hear that they were not actually happy. They hear that the constant chasing was exhausting. They hear that they had given up things quietly and gradually to keep showing up for someone who could not show up for them. They hear that they had confused the intensity of the chase with the depth of the love. That distinction is everything. Intensity is not intimacy. The highs and lows of a push-pull dynamic feel like passion. They feel like aliveness. They feel like this must be real because it hurts this much. But genuine intimacy is actually quieter than that. Genuine intimacy feels like safety. It feels like being known without performing. It feels like rest, not exhaustion. And the empath is starting to understand for the first time that they do not actually know what pain that feels like, because they have been so busy chasing the intensity that they never stop to ask whether the relationship was actually giving them what they needed. Now for the avoidant in this extended no contact, something different but equally significant is happening. If the avoidant has any self-awareness at all, and many avoidants do, even though they rarely show it, the silence becomes a mirror. They start to see their own patterns with a clarity that pursuit from the empath never allowed. When the empath was chasing, the avoidant could focus on the discomfort of being chased. They could tell themselves the problem was the intensity, the neediness, the pressure. They could locate the problem in the other person. But in the silence, that story falls apart because the empath is not doing anything now. The empath is not texting, not calling, not pushing, and the avoidant still feels terrible. Which means the problem is not the empath. The problem is inside the avoidant. And that is a confrontation with the self that is genuinely painful. This is the moment where avoidants either grow or retreat into a new relationship to escape the discomfort. And that is a pattern worth understanding. Many avoidants, when faced with the silence of no contact, do not go inward. They go sideways. They find someone new. They create new intensity to drown out the old pain. They replace one dynamic for another. And they do this so quickly that people on the outside think they never cared. They think it was never real. They think the avoidant is just cold and incapable of real feeling. But that fast movement into someone new is actually evidence of the opposite. It is evidence of how overwhelming the feeling is. You do not run that fast from something that does not matter. You run that fast from something that is touching the most unresolved part of you. And what is the most unresolved part of an avoidant? It is the belief that they cannot be loved as they are. That if they actually let someone see all of them, the messy and vulnerable and uncertain parts, that person would leave. That the only way to be in relationship is to be somewhat unreachable, because an unreachable person cannot be truly rejected. When the empath goes no contact, that belief gets activated at its root, because now the empath has in fact left, and the avoidant has to decide what that means. Either it confirms the belief, of course they left, everyone leaves. I was right to keep my distance, or it challenges the belief. Maybe I push them away. Maybe I am the one who creates this outcome. Maybe I need to look at that. The avoidant who chooses the second path is rare, but they exist. And when they do that work, real transformation becomes possible. But here is the thing that the empath needs to understand. Even if the avoidant does that work, even if they do go and see a therapist and start unpacking their attachment wounds, that growth is not something the empath can wait for. Because waiting for someone else to grow while putting your own healing on pause is itself a wound response. It is the empath's wound saying, "My job is to stay available until you are ready for me." And that is not love. That is a trauma response dressed up as devotion. Real love, actual healthy love, does not require you to disappear yourself while waiting for someone else to become capable of seeing you. So, what does healthy look like for both of these people coming out the other side of this? For the empath, health looks like rebuilding the relationship with themselves first. It looks like learning to feel their own feelings without immediately trying to fix them or express them in the direction of someone else. It looks like developing a tolerance for their own needs, which for the empath can feel almost selfish because their entire identity has been built around being needless. It looks like finding relationships where their care is met with equal care, where their showing up is not a one-sided performance of devotion, but an exchange, a real exchange. And perhaps most importantly, it looks like learning to notice the early signs of this dynamic. Because empaths do not accidentally fall for avoidance once, they do it repeatedly. Not because they are masochistic, but because the dynamic feels familiar. The emotional unavailability of the avoidant mirrors something from their past, usually a parent or early caregiver who was unpredictable or emotionally unavailable. And the empath has spent their whole life trying to finally crack the code on that original, unavailable person. Finally win the love that was withheld. Finally prove that if you just love hard enough, the walls will come down. And every time they enter that dynamic with a new person, some unconscious part of them believes this time they will finally succeed. Healing for the empath means grieving that original loss. Not just the relationship that just ended, but the original wound underneath it. The child who needed consistent love and did not get it. The person who learned that love is something you earn rather than something you are worthy of by simply existing. That is grief work. It is not linear. It is not fast. But it is the only work that actually ends the cycle. For the avoidant, health looks like developing a tolerance for closeness. Not jumping into intimacy overnight, but gradually, intentionally, learning to stay present in moments of emotional connection without the system reading it as a threat. It looks like understanding that vulnerability did not actually destroy them every time they risked it, even if it felt like it might. It looks like building a new internal story about what love is and what it requires. Because the avoidant story is that love requires them to disappear, to be less, to manage themselves down so that the other person does not see too much and decide it is too much. Health means writing a new story, one where being known fully is safe, one where staying does not mean losing yourself. And that work for both of these people does not happen inside the dynamic. It cannot happen inside the dynamic. The dynamic itself is the obstacle to the growth, which is exactly why no contact, when it is maintained with genuine intention and not just used as a manipulation tactic, can be one of the most powerful catalysts for change that exists. Not because silence is magic, but because silence removes the noise that both people have been using to avoid the most important conversation they have ever needed to have, the one with themselves. Now let us talk about what actually happens when two people like this go no contact and one of them does that inner work and one of them does not, because this is the scenario most people find themselves in, and the outcome is usually painful in a very specific way. The person who does the inner work, let us say it is the empath in this case, starts to change slowly at first, almost invisibly. They start to feel different in their own body, lighter, more grounded, less reactive. They start to have more capacity for their own life. Their friendships feel different. Their mornings feel different. They are not waking up thinking about the avoidant first thing anymore. They are waking up thinking about what they actually want from their day. And then the avoidant reaches out, and something surprising happens. The empath feels less, not nothing. There are still feelings. The history is still there. The love was real. But the urgency is gone. The desperation is gone. The sense that this relationship is the only thing standing between them and total emotional collapse is gone. And they look at the message from the avoidant, and they feel something they have never felt before in this dynamic. They feel like they have a choice. And that feeling of choice, that is the whole thing. That is everything. That is what healing actually looks like in practice. Because before that healing, they did not feel like they had a choice. Every message from the avoidant felt like a gravitational pull, like a biological imperative, like something they were powerless against. And now they are sitting there and they can read the message and they can feel the old pull. And they can also feel something else. Something that says, I get to decide what happens next. And sometimes they decide to respond and sometimes they decide not to. But either way, the decision is coming from a healed place rather than a wounded one. And that changes everything about the outcome. Now, on the avoidant side, if they did not do that inner work, if they use the no contact period to find someone new or to throw themselves into work, or to generally stay as far away from their own emotional experience as possible, then their reach out to the empath is coming from that same old wounded place. It is not transformation. It is regulation. They are not reaching out because they have grown. They are reaching out because their nervous system needs calming. And the empath was very good at calming it. And if the empath has done their work, they can often feel the difference. Not always right away, but it is there if they are paying attention. The reach out that comes from genuine growth feels different from the reach out that comes from avoidant anxiety. One has weight and ownership to it. The other is still a little bit slippery, a little bit just enough contact to calm the panic, but not enough to actually close the distance. And the healed empath, who is now learning to trust their own perceptions, starts to notice that difference and they make their decisions accordingly. This is what healing actually produces. Not a perfect outcome, not a guarantee that the relationship works, but the ability to see clearly and act from a place of genuine self-knowledge rather than desperate attachment. Let us also talk about the scenario where both people do the work because it happens. It is not common, but it happens. When both people come out of no contact having genuinely confronted their own patterns, something remarkable is possible. A completely different relationship. Not the same dynamic restarted, but an actual new beginning, with new skills and new self-awareness and new capacity for the kind of love that does not cost you yourself. The avoidant who has done real work can stay, can be present, can let themselves be known without the panic reading it as a threat. Not perfectly, not without difficulty, but they can do it in a way that they could not before. And the empath who has done real work can receive love without feeling like they need to earn it.